Is it a reason why you guys are not paying whatever that vendor is?
What was it for?
The simmering unrest in Thornton Township, Dalton, Illinois, has intensified into a full-blown political crisis, centered around the controversial figure of Tiffany Henyard. Known for her exaggerated demeanor and self-styled moniker, Super Mayor, Henyard is currently embroiled in a scandal over her exclusion from the Democratic nomination for Township Supervisor. Allegations of corruption and election interference have taken center stage, and multiple lawsuits have been filed against her from all directions. The repercussions of the ongoing controversy have been significant. Henyard's situation has polarized public opinion. Her supporters portray her as a victim of unfair political tactics, positioning her as a martyr fighting against a rigged system. They argue she is being silenced in an effort to quash her political influence. Meanwhile, her opponents accuse her of using any means necessary, regardless of ethics or legality, to maintain her grasp on power. These critics contend that Henyard's actions reflect a desperate attempt to hold onto a position of leadership amid growing opposition and public frustration. Many local residents allege election tampering and procedural misconduct as part of Henyard's attempts to secure her re-election. Henyard and her legal team have responded by filing lawsuits, alleging deliberate sabotage, unfair practices, and a calculated attempt to remove her from the ballot. Henyard has framed this as a battle against a corrupt political machine, claiming that her Democratic Party rivals are actively working to suppress her supporters and prevent them from participating in the electoral process. The narrative her team has spun portrays her as a courageous figure standing up for justice in the face of systemic oppression. However, political insiders argue that Henyard's legal efforts are nothing more than a desperate last-ditch attempt by a politician whose grip on power is weakening. These experts suggest that Henyard's legal actions are escalating the already tense situation and may alienate even her most loyal supporters. Critics of Henyard's administration argue that her leadership has been marked by divisiveness and self-interest, highlighting her history of conflicts with fellow trustees and allegations of financial mismanagement, such as questionable expenditures and the misuse of township resources for personal gain. Despite these accusations, Henyard's defenders celebrate her resilience and determination, casting her as a defiant figure standing up against perceived corruption. Her ability to rally a dwindling base of supporters has made her a lightning rod for both praise and condemnation. However, even some of her most ardent supporters are beginning to question her leadership style. There are increasing reports of internal strife within the Henyard administration, with some of her closest allies expressing concerns about her growing authoritarian tendencies and her inability to effectively address the township's pressing issues. This erosion of her inner circle reflects broader discontent among Thornton Township residents. Many locals have become disillusioned with Henyard's leadership and are calling for greater transparency, accountability, and a return to stable governance. The township, already struggling with financial instability and inadequate services, is now grappling with the fallout from Henyard's political battles. Residents have expressed frustration that their elected officials seem more focused on personal feuds than on meeting the immediate needs of the community. Henyard's political drama has also garnered attention beyond the borders of Dalton, thanks to its theatrical and combative nature. Her aggressive style, characterized by unapologetic defiance and a tendency to turn every disagreement into a public spectacle, has made her a polarizing figure even outside of the township. Her decision to adopt the title of Super Mayor, which some view as a self-serving attempt to consolidate power, has drawn criticism for its perceived arrogance and ambition. Despite the widespread criticism, Henyard remains unbowed. She continues to maintain that her fight is rooted in principle, not personal gain. She insists that her exclusion from the ballot is a direct assault on her supporters' democratic rights and a personal attack on her character. In her view, her struggle is emblematic of a larger battle against a corrupt political system that seeks to silence voices like hers as the situation unfolds. It's clear that Thornton Township's political unrest is no longer just about Henyard's fate. It's about the broader question of how the town is governed. Many residents are questioning whether the infighting and personal vendettas taking center stage are more important to their elected leaders than ensuring the town's essential services are delivered effectively. The ongoing political drama is overshadowing the township's vital functions, which are already under strain due to financial instability and mismanagement. The future of Henyard's political career remains uncertain, with some observers speculating that even her most loyal supporters may eventually be turned off by her relentless pursuit of power. Others believe that, regardless of the outcome, The fallout from this conflict will have lasting effects on both Henyard's reputation and the governance of Thornton Township. As this political saga continues, one thing is clear. The situation in Dalton has reached a boiling point, and the resolution of this crisis may very well shape the future of the township for years to come. The political unrest in Thornton Township, Dalton, Illinois, has been stirred by a rare and contentious event in the local Democratic Party. For the first time in over 3 decades, a caucus was held instead of the typical primary election, igniting widespread speculation and controversy. The decision to hold a caucus, especially with such high political stakes and timing, raised many questions. Particularly given the implications it had on the upcoming election. The caucus was organized under the leadership of State Senator and Township Democratic Committeeman Napoleon Harris. Many perceived the move as an orchestrated attempt to undermine Mayor Tiffany Henyard's objectives and ultimately challenge her authority. Henyard, a highly controversial but determined figure, had been working to secure a spot on the Democratic ballot for the April election. However, the caucus turned out to be an unexpected and insurmountable obstacle. Reports suggest that Harris and his supporters set up the caucus in a way that directly excluded Henyard's slate of candidates. A critical requirement for the nomination, a certified assessor, was missing from Henyard's team. Without this essential component, her bid for the Democratic nomination was rendered null and void, effectively shutting her out of the ballot. Although the disqualification appeared to be based on a technicality, many saw it as a deliberate and politically motivated move designed to shift the township's leadership dynamic in favor of Harris. Taking advantage of Henyard's disqualification, Harris nominated himself and his slate of candidates, promising that his team would now be included as the Democratic nominees. The immediate consequences were severe, with Henyard viewing the move as more than just a political loss. For her, it was a direct attack on her authority and position as mayor. Her supporters, on the other hand, saw it as part of a larger effort by the party establishment to silence dissenting opinions and undermine her leadership. The decision to hold a caucus rather than a primary election has sparked widespread controversy. Henyard's team argues that the caucus method was intentionally chosen to create barriers for her re-election campaign. They point out that the caucus had not been used in Thornton Township for decades, making its sudden implementation appear suspicious and strategically timed. Henyard's supporters claim that the caucus structure, which is more inclusive and opaque, was designed to benefit Harris and his supporters by avoiding public scrutiny and limiting the number of people involved in the selection process. Critics of the caucus argue that it was less representative and less inclusive than a primary election, where a larger and more diverse group of voters could have participated. Instead, the caucus involved a smaller, more concentrated group, limiting the broader community's input. For Henyard supporters, this exclusion is seen as voter suppression and a disregard for democratic norms. They contend that the caucus was an undemocratic maneuver designed to silence their voices and prevent Henyard from securing her place on the ballot. Harris and his supporters, however, defend the decision to hold a caucus, arguing that it was a practical step to ensure stronger leadership for the township. They maintain that Henyard's disqualification was the result of her own failure to meet the necessary requirements, and that the caucus offered a more organized and equitable process for selecting the Democratic candidates. In their view, Henyard's failure to fulfill the rules was not part of any scheme, but rather an issue of readiness and adherence to the established process. The fallout from the caucus has exposed deep divisions within the community. Accusations of corruption, voter tampering, and the erosion of democratic standards have spread throughout Thornton Township and beyond. While Henyard's critics view the outcome as a necessary and legitimate step to remove a leader whose tenure has been marked by controversy, her supporters see it as a calculated attack on the democratic process. They argue that Henyard's exclusion from the ballot is part of a larger effort by political elites to remove a leader who has dared to challenge the status quo. This political crisis has had significant implications for Henyard's career. Although she has been excluded from the Democratic ballot, she remains defiant and is presenting herself as a victim of systemic injustice. Henyard's team has not ruled out the possibility of challenging the legality of the caucus or running as an independent candidate in the April election. Despite the setback, Henyard's refusal to back down from the fight has cemented her as a polarizing figure, with her supporters rallying behind her as a champion of democracy, while her critics see her as a divisive figure whose tenure has done more harm than good. Napoleon Harris, whose actions have solidified his position as a political power in Thornton Township, now finds himself the target of criticism from those who view his tactics as undermining the democratic process. While his supporters defend his actions as necessary to ensure the township's stability, others see him as a symbol of political manipulation. The controversy surrounding the caucus has ignited a chain reaction, not only affecting the candidates involved, but also the broader electorate. The situation in Thornton Township is a clear indication of a political system that is willing to prioritize political advantage over the needs of the community. As the April election approaches, the tensions within the township continue to simmer, with residents questioning whether the government's focus on settling personal and political scores is overshadowing the more urgent needs of the community. The outcome of this political struggle may ultimately shape the future of the township, but for now, the uncertainty remains, and the electorate's disillusionment with the process is growing.
The government always does it, is to go and investigate people around.
Mayor Tiffany Henyard has made it clear that she will not be defeated easily after being ousted from the Thornton Township Democratic caucus. The atmosphere was tense as she accused the meeting of foul play, describing the entire process as a planned conspiracy orchestrated by State Senator Napoleon Harris. According to reports, Henyard demanded accountability, blasting Harris's management and calling the event a deliberate attempt to disenfranchise her supporters and remove her from the race. Despite Henyard's accusations of election manipulation, Harris and his team emerged as the clear winners, securing their candidacy for the April ballot. Meanwhile, Henyard's name and her incomplete list of candidates were eliminated due to procedural issues, including the failure to present a certified assessor. Infuriated, Henyard wasted no time in portraying the caucus as a political assault aimed at derailing her career. She accused Harris of rigging the election with dishonest tactics to maintain control over the township's democratic machine. Not one to back down, Henyard vowed to challenge the results through legal action, claiming that the caucus process was an insult to democracy and her ambitions. She argued that her exclusion was part of a larger pattern of voter suppression and corruption within the township's political system, promising to sue all parties involved in what she described as an illegal, undemocratic charade. Henyard's fierce reaction, marked by emotional and calculated language, framed her struggle as a fight for justice. She contended that the use of a caucus, an election method that hadn't been used in Thornton Township for more than 30 years, was a deliberate attempt to keep her name off the ballot. She argued that the decision to deviate from the traditional primary election process was orchestrated by Harris's team to prevent her from establishing her candidacy and reaching a broader base of supporters. Henyard's campaign had been criticized for failing to offer a full slate of candidates, a procedural oversight that Harris's team exploited to eliminate her from the process. As the conflict unfolded, Henyard's refusal to back down only intensified the divide within the township's Democratic base. Some viewed her defiance as a continuation of backroom politics, while others saw her as a victim of a corrupt system. Legal experts suggest that although Henyard's accusations may lack merit, the spectacle surrounding her claims could prolong the dispute and deepen rifts within the community. Harris and his supporters dismissed Henyard's allegations, asserting that the caucus process was legal and equitable according to party rules. Henyard, however, vehemently disagreed, arguing that the event caused significant anxiety and unease in the community, exacerbating divisions over individual and collective goals. The legal and political drama surrounding the caucus has brought Thornton Township into the spotlight, with its implications likely to impact the township's political climate for years to come. The controversy surrounding Henyard's exclusion has sparked growing claims of voter fraud and suppression. Henyard contended that her supporters were subjected to unfair barriers when hundreds of them were left outside the venue in freezing weather, unable to access buses that had been arranged to bring elderly residents to the caucus. Reportedly, the buses arrived late, and many supporters were turned away at the door. Inside, participants were admitted in intervals, with only 2 people allowed to enter at a time, leading to increased tensions and frustration. Henyard argued that these measures were intentional, designed to limit access to the event. Henyard's charges gained traction when she revealed that the meeting itself lasted only 7 minutes. Her supporters, she claimed, had barely enough time to attend, let alone participate in the process. Critics described this as a planned takeover by Harris and his associates, replacing what should have been a fair and open procedure with a fast-track process that excluded other candidates. The caucus's brief duration and the lack of meaningful discussion or opportunity for nominations left many disenfranchised and furious. In response to these events, Henyard and her team have accused Harris and his colleagues of orchestrating a voter suppression campaign. They argued that discriminatory door rules and the slow buses were evidence of a calculated effort to limit participation to Harris's supporters. Henyard also cast doubt on the legitimacy of the meeting, calling the 7-minute session a mockery of democratic principles. She accused the township's Democratic Party of systemic corruption, claiming that such practices had been going on for years without accountability. Harris, on the other hand, defended the caucus as a lawful and valid procedure conducted according to party rules. He argued that Henyard's exclusion was due to her failure to present a full slate of candidates, not a deliberate attempt to undermine her. Harris denied Henyard's charges as baseless, asserting that they were politically motivated and an attempt to deflect attention from her own shortcomings. The stakes in the caucus dispute extend beyond Henyard's immediate electoral chances. The fallout has caused further division within the township, placing Henyard's loyal supporters in a difficult position despite Henyard's polarizing reputation, marked by controversy and divisiveness. She has framed the caucus dispute as part of a broader struggle for justice. In the wake of the caucus, Henyard made it clear that she would not let the process stand. She has strongly vowed to hold accountable those involved in what she describes as a blatant violation of her rights and the rights of her supporters. In doing so, she has positioned herself as a champion of the disenfranchised and marginalized members of the community. Urging her followers to continue fighting the caucus controversy has generated a wide range of opinions. Some of Henyard's detractors argue that she is using accusations of voter suppression to deflect attention from her own leadership failures. Critics point to her inability to prepare a full slate of candidates and argue that this procedural oversight was the main reason for her exclusion. They assert that breaking the rules does not constitute voter suppression and that Henyard's leadership flaws are at the heart of her downfall. Moreover, Henyard's administration has been under intense scrutiny, with accusations of financial misconduct and embezzlement surfacing. A report alleged that Henyard used taxpayer funds to make extravagant purchases, including $30,000 in Amazon charges in one day. Other reports indicated that Henyard had spent around $100,000 on travel, meals, and other personal expenses, raising concerns about financial mismanagement. These controversies have led to calls for Henyard's resignation, with some community members even describing her as the worst mayor in America. The financial state of Dalton, where Henyard also served as mayor, further highlights the challenges of her leadership. Under her direction, the village's finances deteriorated, with the general fund balance falling from over $5 million to a deficit of nearly $4 million in just 2 years. Investigations uncovered excessive overtime pay for police officers, and reports indicate that Henyard's communication style contributed to tensions within the village board, where she has. Moreover, Henyard's administration has been under intense scrutiny, with accusations of financial misconduct and embezzlement surfacing. A report alleged that Henyard used taxpayer funds to make extravagant purchases, including $30,000 in Amazon charges in one day. Other reports indicated that Henyard had spent around $100,000 on travel, meals, and other personal expenses, raising concerns about financial mismanagement. These controversies have led to calls for Henyard's resignation, with some community members even describing her as the worst mayor in America. The financial state of Dalton, where Henyard also served as mayor, further highlights the challenges of her leadership. Under her direction, the village's finances deteriorated, with the general fund balance falling from over $5 million to a deficit of nearly $4 million in just 2 years. Investigations uncovered excessive overtime pay for police officers, and reports indicate that Henyard's communication style contributed to tensions within the village board, where she has been accused of bullying and suppressing her critics amid growing opposition. Henyard's supporters argue that she is being unfairly targeted by a political machine intent on silencing her. They believe that the caucus was rigged to remove her from the race because of her influence among key voter groups. For them, the fight over the caucus represents much more than a nomination. It's a battle to preserve their leader and prevent the establishment from undermining the will of the people despite the scandals and growing mistrust surrounding her leadership. Henyard has vowed to continue fighting to retain her job as mayor and supervisor of Thornton Township. Legal experts warn that the court dispute could drag on for months, further dividing an already fractured community and costing taxpayers more money. Meanwhile, Harris and other candidates are intensifying their campaigns, with some predicting that Henyard's chances of winning are slim. As the political drama unfolds, the future of Thornton Township remains uncertain, shaped by the ongoing battle over Henyard's exclusion and the larger questions of leadership, corruption, and democratic integrity. Tiffany Henyard has vowed to take legal action in response to what she has described as an unfair and unjust process following her exclusion from the Thornton Township Democratic Caucus. Henyard has openly accused State Senator Napoleon Harris and his associates of orchestrating the event to deliberately silence her supporters and prevent her from securing a spot on the Democratic ballot. In her statements, Henyard has promised to hold those involved accountable for what she views as a blatant violation of her and her supporters' rights. She has positioned herself as a champion for the disenfranchised, calling on her followers to keep fighting against the political establishment. The controversy surrounding Henyard's exclusion has generated significant debate. Supporters of Henyard have hinted at plans to challenge the results of the caucus in court, citing numerous irregularities and violations of the rules. Ally Keith Price, a staunch supporter of Henyard, called the caucus the biggest fraud he had ever witnessed, pointing out that hundreds of Henyard supporters were left outside the venue, unable to participate. Election lawyer Carcraft Keir has also raised concerns, calling for an investigation into the caucus procedures. He pointed out rule violations, including the lack of documentation to prove voter eligibility, which he believes should have been required for the event despite Henyard's claims of voter suppression and fraud. Critics argue that she is deflecting attention from her own leadership shortcomings. They point out that Henyard had ample time to prepare for the caucus, including submitting a full slate of candidates, one of the key requirements for being on the ballot. Furthermore, Henyard's claims about Harris and his associates manipulating the caucus to keep her off the ballot are undermined by her failure to include a professional assessor on her slate, a basic mistake that contributed to her exclusion. One local resident remarked that breaking the law is not the same as suppressing votes, highlighting Henyard's lack of preparedness as a contributing factor to her removal from the ballot. The scandal surrounding Henyard's exclusion from the caucus has sparked more extensive discussions about her leadership style, which has drawn sharp criticism from her detractors. While Henyard portrays herself as a champion of the people, opposing the political establishment, her actions and rhetoric have only served to further polarize the community. Critics argue that her combative and aggressive tactics have overshadowed her ability to lead with calm and reason. These critics claim that Henyard's leadership has been marked by a disregard for political norms when they don't align with her goals. Accusations of a hostile takeover, along with Henyard's calls for Harris to man up and her label of Harris as a coward, have done little to build confidence in her leadership, although Henyard supporters maintain that her exclusion from the ballot was the result of a political conspiracy to undermine her authority. Her polarizing behavior has eclipsed many of the efforts she has made to improve the township. Some locals question whether her leadership is ultimately benefiting or harming the community. They assert that Harris and his associates deliberately manipulated the caucus procedures to prevent Henyard from running because they knew she had significant influence over key voter groups. For these supporters, the fight over the caucus is about much more than just securing the nomination. It represents an existential battle to protect a leader they believe is being unfairly targeted by the political establishment. Henyard supporters have expressed disbelief that she has been singled out for her accomplishments, arguing that her exclusion was a result of political maneuvering designed to topple a popular leader. Rumors about Henyard's next move have gone viral, and many of her supporters are convinced that the damage to her reputation will be irreversible. However, some are still holding out hope that she can mount a comeback, possibly through a write-in campaign, despite the growing concerns surrounding her leadership. There is still uncertainty about whether such a campaign would be enough to resolve the scandals that continue to plague her administration as the situation continues to unfold. There are growing concerns about whether Henyard will seek to retain her job as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township. Even among her opponents, who acknowledge her ability to galvanize certain segments of the population, there are questions about the transparency and impartiality of the local political system. The decision to hold a caucus instead of a primary election has also been criticized, as many residents feel that it reduced voter participation. According to Harris, the caucus method has been used in other Illinois townships for years, and he defended the process as lawful and reasonable. Despite the criticisms it has sparked in Thornton Township, Harris has insisted that the caucus adhere to party rules and that the outcome was in line with expectations. He acknowledged that some residents may be unfamiliar with caucuses because Thornton Township has not held one in decades, but he argued that the process is valid and has been used successfully in other areas. In response to Henyard's accusations, Harris rejected the claims, asserting that the caucus was not rigged and that Henyard's exclusion was due to her failure to meet the necessary requirements. Despite Harris's defense of the caucus, the aftermath of the event has had severe consequences for Henyard's political career. Her legal team is preparing to contest the results in court, alleging that the rules were applied arbitrarily and that Henyard's exclusion was part of a prearranged plan. The scandal has also brought Henyard's leadership under intense scrutiny, particularly regarding allegations of financial misconduct during her tenure as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township. Henyard has been accused of embezzling taxpayer funds for personal expenses, with one particularly damning report claiming that she spent over $30,000 on Amazon purchases using the town's credit card in a single day. Other reports indicate that she spent around $100,000 on travel, meals, and other personal expenses. These revelations have led some community members to call for her resignation, with some even dubbing her the worst mayor in America. Under Henyard's leadership, Dalton's finances have deteriorated, with the general fund balance falling from over $5 million to nearly a $4 million deficit in just 2 years. Investigations also uncovered cases of excessive overtime pay for police officers, one officer's overtime exceeding double their annual salary as Henyard's leadership has come under scrutiny. Her relationship with the Dalton Village Board has also been marked by tension. Henyard has been accused of bullying and repressing critics within the board, which has contributed to an atmosphere of dysfunction. At a recent board meeting, Henyard reportedly said, "I am your mayor," a statement that caused many people in the audience to leave or turn against her. These tensions have added to perception that Henyard's leadership style is marked by a disregard for open dialogue and collaboration. The growing controversies surrounding Henyard's leadership have caught the attention of federal authorities. The FBI is currently investigating Henyard for alleged financial misconduct, including the possible misuse and embezzlement of public funds. As part of the investigation, the FBI has already interviewed Henyard extensively and subpoenaed documents related to her spending. Additionally, Henyard's ally, Keith Price, may also be a target of federal prosecutors after being investigated on bankruptcy fraud charges despite the mounting opposition and growing calls for her resignation. Henyard has declared that she will continue fighting to keep her job as mayor of Dalton and supervisor of Thornton Township. She has stated that many of her neighbors have voiced their displeasure with her leadership, but she remains resolute in her determination to stand by her supporters. However, Henyard's critics argue that the continued legal battle over the caucus results will only further divide an already fractured community, with taxpayers footing the bill for an ongoing dispute as the campaign for the supervisor position in Thornton Township intensifies. With Harris and other candidates vying for control, some residents have expressed their frustration with the political system. One user stated that Henyard should not be in charge at all, calling her actions fraud and insisting that she should never be allowed to run for public office again. Christopher Clark, an independent candidate for the position, faces significant challenges in winning over voters in a community that has been deeply divided by scandal and controversy. Many believe that Henyard's time as mayor and supervisor is over, and that she will not be elected in the upcoming election. The political landscape in Thornton Township is now at a crossroads, with Henyard's future hanging in the balance. While her supporters remain loyal, the scandals and controversies surrounding her leadership have left many questioning her ability to lead the community effectively. The ongoing legal disputes, combined with growing mistrust of her leadership, have created an uncertain future for Henyard and for the township itself. The battle over the caucus results is likely to continue for months, further intensifying the divisions within the community and drawing more attention to the state of local politics in Thornton Township.